In today's video, we're taking a look at the latest trade talk around the Montreal Canadiens and the Vegas Golden Knights. We have further comments on the Mitchell Miller situation from Bruins president Cam Neely. We have news on the NHL waiver wire, some more roster moves, as well as a quick press conference from Sens GM Pierre Dorion with some injury updates and some notes about head coach DJ Smith. We'll discuss all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some trade talk to take a look at today. Before we jump into today's news, though, I just want to acknowledge a big loss in the hockey community. In the past couple of days, the hockey world has lost Habs broadcaster Peter McNabb. Now, depending on how old you are and how long you've been a hockey fan, how long you've been watching the game, you may know McNabb as the broadcaster for the Avalanche. He was a very well respected broadcaster, very good at his craft here, but of course he was also a long-time NHL player. McNabb, back I think it was about 2 years ago, was originally diagnosed with cancer, made that publicly known. The last word I had heard was that he was in remission, but apparently he did come back, and that's ultimately what ended his life, unfortunately, at the young age of 70 years of age. Now, of course, McNabb had a pretty solid NHL career, played for the Buffalo Sabres for a few years, then he went on to play for the Boston Bruins, where he spent the bulk of his career. I know for me, I mainly remember him being a Bruin. He was a 6-time 30-goal scorer and a 2-time 40-goal scorer. After he left Boston, he went on to play a couple of seasons each with the Vancouver Canucks and New Jersey Devils. But certainly, a guy in the hockey world that a lot of people describe as being extremely approachable, very generous with his time, very easy to talk to, just a big fan of the game as much as a lot of other people have been basically in the sport for their entire life. So I want to pass on our condolences to the McNabb family. A big loss here for the hockey community. Now, on the first part of the news I want to touch on here today is the waiver wire, which we found out today that the Montreal Canadiens were placing forward Rem Pitlick on waivers. That was a bit surprising. I do understand he's had a slow start to the season. He's played in 7 games and yet to register a point. Obviously, last year when they picked him up on waivers, he actually had a good run with them. Last year, during the 46 games he played in Montreal, he put up 26 points, got re-signed to a 2-year deal, $1.1 million per season. Things were looking very much positive for Pitlick to have a much longer stay in Montreal. But of course, now he may still remain there and go down to the minors, but he may also get picked up by another NHL club and be completely moved on. Now, of course, that contract is not terrible. It's not a ton of money or a ton of term, but it seems like the more common players we see taken on waivers are ones in 1-year deals or in the final year of the contract, where he does have that extra year. With a slow start this year, it might reduce the chances of him getting picked up, but we will find out. Now, of course, the Blackhawks also have Dylan Wells on waivers today as well. It's expected he's likely going to clear and be reassigned. Pitlick will be the more interesting name to watch, and we'll find out at 2 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow. We will touch on a little bit more of the Montreal Canadiens here a little bit later in the video. Former Vancouver Canuck Jake Virtanen is making another attempt at hockey, but he's going back overseas. We do know he played briefly in the KHL last year, tried to come back in the NHL this year with the Oilers. It did not work out, and now he signed a 2-year deal to go play over in the Swiss League. So Virtanen will go to Europe again, hopefully a little bit more successful this time for his sake. And we'll see. I'm not really sure if another NHL opportunity will arise. A lot of that will probably be dependent on how well he plays during his time in Switzerland. Now on to some roster updates. The Chicago Blackhawks get 1 goalie back, another goalie goes out. We already knew Alex Stalock had an injury situation he was dealing with. He's officially on IR now, but they are able to activate Peter Mrazek, so he's back in action there. The Seattle Kraken had to demote Joey Daccord back to the minors, but recalled Christopher Gibson. The Pittsburgh Penguins sent down Drew O'Connor to Wilkes-Barre, and the Minnesota Wild have brought up a few forwards as well. They likely won't be there too long because they do have some players returning from injury soon, but Joseph Cramarosa and Adam Beckman both have been called up. The Ottawa Senators also announced a variety of things today, which we'll touch on. The talking points here from Pierre Dorion's brief media availability that kind of spontaneously came up this afternoon, but they have recalled Jacob Bernard-Docker again. He was called up, of course, for their last game, but did not play. And now it looks like he is going to jump into the lineup. I'm not really sure why he didn't get in, because by calling him up, he ended up missing 2 American Hockey League games, which obviously, when you're a young developing player, you kind of want him to play as much as possible to continue working on things and getting better every day. They call him up just to be the extra D, because there was word that some of these Sens defensemen were dealing with some minor injuries. DJ Smith described it as being nicked up. I honestly don't entirely buy that. I think part of it was the debate of whether or not to scratch Nikita Zaitsev and give another defenseman a chance. And they opted to go again with Zaitsev, which resulted in another loss. Now, I'm not going to pin this loss entirely on number 22, Nikita Zaitsev, but he did have some moments that certainly impacted the game in a negative fashion. That we can say with absolute certainty, and something has to give back there. The amount of time that DJ Smith keeps giving this defenseman, even though he continues to struggle, is a little bit crazy. I know some fans have been calling for a coaching change, which we're not going to be getting anytime soon. In Dorian's availability today, he did take the moment to give DJ Smith a vote of confidence, saying DJ is their coach, and that any shortcomings right now he kind of took more of the responsibility, saying that it's more on him. Of course, to make sure that they have the right roster, and obviously to a degree on the players too. And, the accountability is certainly spread around. But he also mentioned that this next stretch of the next 10 games, extremely important. So it's fair to say, if the next 10 games don't go well, even though he gave DJ a vote of confidence today, that confidence may not be there in a few weeks' time if things don't change. So we'll see, but it does look like Jacob Bernard-Docker will enter tomorrow night's game where the Senators host the Vancouver Canucks. He was skating with Thomas Chabot at practice today, so it looks like Zaitsev will be a scratch for the next one. So we should see something, hopefully some improvement, and just overall better job from everybody. I mean, they haven't played terrible. They just have had a few lapses here and there and some poor defensive coverage. And it just seems like whenever they do make mistakes, it goes in their net. But at the end of the day, the forwards need to generate a little bit more lately as well. They were scoring at a much higher clip earlier in the year than they did, for example, in the last game against the Flyers. Now, the other big news that came out of Ottawa today was the update on Josh Norris. Of course, their number 1 center went down with a shoulder injury on a freak play on a face-off a while back, and he's been debating whether or not to have surgery or rehab or what the prognosis is going to be. They did update things today, saying that he's now seen 5 doctors. Apparently 2 of them were well-respected specialists in the shoulder field. I'm not sure who the other doctors were, but obviously right now they've opted not for surgery. Rehab is the plan. Because of that, it's hard to put a clear-cut timeline, but Pierre Dorion did say that they're kind of reevaluate or optimistic for early in the new year. But it's really difficult to say for sure. It's always possible that the rehab goes really well and he gets back, and it's also very much possible with rehabbing things that maybe it doesn't go as well as planned, and he either takes longer or ends up opting for surgery at a later time. So Norris seemed to be in good spirits, and I guess they're trying to be optimistic that it's possible for a January return or a bit later, but that he's definitely going to hopefully be able to make it back this year. But it's just really hard to say with these kind of situations. Now, speaking of injuries that are hard to predict, New Jersey Devils goaltender Mackenzie Blackwood, we know, was injured a few days ago. We do have a little bit more details on that injury, but we don't know the severity of it. It's been revealed that Blackwood's dealing with a sprained MCL. But we don't know the grade of the sprain. Different grades are different timelines. Average is probably 4 to 6 weeks. Some more mild sprains can be like 2 to 3 weeks. And then there's some more severe ones that sometimes even require surgery and can possibly be looking at multiple months recovery. So it's just really hard to say. I think it's probably fair to say that an average one, like a mediocre one, is like a 4 to 6 week range, is probably what he's dealing with, but we really don't know and can't say that with certainty. So, fair to say that, considering we're into the early part of November, it's probably going to be at least December before he can return, but it could be longer. It's really hard to say until they talk a little bit more openly about the severity of the sprain. It's hard to say how that's going to go. Now, of course, we had a press conference this morning from the Boston Bruins and President Cam Neely. We got the breaking news last night that they decided to drop Mitchell Miller, the prospect who they signed, I think it was 2 days prior, due to a lot of backlash. And then obviously they tried to say there was new information that was learned, which basically changed their minds on things. But the other thing, too, that I found unusual is that today we did not find out that Mitchell Miller was on unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination. So I don't know how this is going to go. I know the Bruins have announced that they're parting ways with him, but I don't think you can just rescind a contract. Like, you would have to technically terminate it through the right process. I know there was even a tweet on Twitter from Cap Friendly indicating that their expectation was that Miller would go through unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination. I don't know. Maybe they have other grounds to do this if they feel like information was misrepresented or something. A couple comments, though, basically from Neely. Regardless of all that, he's not going to be a Bruin. I just was surprised not to see the formal process be triggered there, but Neely made a few quotes saying basically, and I'm obviously paraphrasing here, that obviously the team has failed in this attempt to sign his player. That was not, obviously in retrospect, not a good idea. They did acknowledge that they should have talked to the victim or the victim's family, which they did not. Obviously, he felt there were some things that he thought was done that weren't done. He's going to be reviewing the situation, kind of doing like his own little investigation to see if there's anybody in the organization needs to face any discipline for any oversights. But, at the end of the day here, the whole thing was a complete and utter disaster that it could have easily been avoided. I know the Bruins players were again asked about the situation because of the reversal of the decision. Patrice Bergeron said essentially that he's glad that their voices were heard, but that basically the players were unanimously against the idea of this signing being made. But of course, the organization did it anyways. And it just is a terrible look. I was a little bit surprised as well with Neely that either ownership didn't have a seat at the table, or worse, Don Sweeney had. I mean, obviously Don Sweeney ultimately would have, been the final sign-off on this signing. I found it odd that Neely was on his own. Is there any way Don Sweeney is going to be in hot water over this? I don't know. I mean, to me, I think Neely was more involved than he probably wanted to admit to the media today. So I don't really know that there was new information. He was asked as well if he felt he was duped at all by Mitchell's agent, Eustace King, based on all the things that they were saying that he had either had previously started to do, completed, or has agreed to work on moving forward, because a lot of those things have been proven to be untrue, and he wouldn't comment on that. So I don't know what more will come from this. Will there be any more repercussions in the Bruins organization? I don't know. Will this player get another opportunity? I really don't know. At this point, I would imagine most teams would be pretty scared of the PR nightmare that's going to come with it should they make an attempt in the future. But we will see. I don't know. I'm not sure if we've heard the end of this or not. Now on to some trade talk. Around the Montreal Canadiens, like I said, there's a lot of people surprised today that Rem Pitlick's on waivers. We know there's more than enough forwards, but we've been waiting on trades for players like Dadonov, Drouin, to a degree Hoffman if they can find one. And it's just unusual that Pitlick might be the guy to go here over these guys who clearly don't have a future in the organization. Drouin and Dadonov are in the final year of their deals, and there's absolutely no way they're going to be re-signed by the Montreal Canadiens. They are not part of this team's future. That is clear as day. Mike Hoffman, I think we can say that probably as well. There's not much future there, but he does have another year in his deal, so he may be sticking around a little longer whether they like it or not. But at the same time, Pitlick going on waivers just caught everybody off guard here, given the fact he had such a promising finish to last season. Even though he's had a slow start, do they really want to risk losing him for nothing this early in the season? And the answer is they're obviously prepared to do that, given the fact that they placed him on waivers. But there's certainly more reports today indicating that the Habs have definitely been trying, and it's just obviously proving quite difficult to get some of these players moved on. It goes to show you there's not much appetite from around the NHL for some of these players. We talked about the Washington Capitals possibly being a fit, given how they have such a long sheet of injury history that they're trying to find players on the NHL roster. They get Obey Kubel from the waiver wire from the Leafs the other day, so that'll help. They could pick up Pitlick on waivers as well. And you know what? If they do that, for example, they probably won't be talking to Montreal anymore about trades because they're probably going to be pretty well set, assuming they don't run into additional injury problems. So at this point, a team like Anaheim very well might prove to be a team that's worth watching in this scenario. Although I believe, based on the deals that tried to take place before, when Evgeny Dadonov was in Vegas, I don't think he wants to go to a California team. So the teams that he's able to block, I believe, are the teams in California. At least that's what they made it sound like before when that deal tried to go down between the Golden Knights and the Ducks back before, it would have been last season before the NHL trade deadline. So I don't know that Dadonov will be going anywhere over there. Maybe Jerard, but there's certainly more deals coming for the Montreal Canadiens. It's kind of difficult to say. But yeah, this waiver wire activity caught everybody off guard and might take another trade option out of the mix here. So we'll have to see how this impacts things, and that's going to be dependent if Pitlick clears or not. On to Vegas. Now, of course, Vegas is off to a hot start this year. A lot of question marks about a few things in Vegas, including Logan Thompson and Adin Hill between the pipes, but so far they've done a nice job. Thompson, to me, is the real deal. I've seen him play numerous occasions this year. Pretty good goaltender. I must say I was pretty impressed with the games that I have watched. So there are some NHL articles suggesting that the Golden Knights very well could be in the goalie trade market for goaltender Laurent Brossoit, who's been playing in their Henderson Silver Knight program in the American Hockey League. Of course, they have Thompson Hill to NHL level. Brossoit is an NHL goaltender, but right now no spot for him. But at the end of the day, is Vegas going to want to take a chance messing with their depth, knowing that Robin Lehner's not going to play this year? If they do move Brossoit and then run into a goaltender injury later on, they could be in some pretty deep trouble. I wouldn't be shocked if they maybe trade Brossoit later into the season. And yes, there are teams out there that need goaltending for sure. There's obviously some teams out there that are not happy with their goaltending. Some is more of an injury standpoint. But I don't know that we're going to see a Golden Knight goalie trade here for a while yet. I mean, obviously, you look around. I know Minnesota wasn't entirely pleased with Gustafsson. They may look to make an upgrade that way. There's other teams dealing with goaltending injuries here as well. Like if the Blackwood news in New Jersey ends up being, more severe than we think it could be, and if he's out longer term, that wouldn't be shocking if they find somebody. But, is he the right player for them? It's difficult to say. Now, of course, you also have some other goalies around the league as well, like Hellberg in Ottawa. They don't really want to put him on waivers because he's likely going to get picked up. So obviously it's assumed that at some point here, when the Sens have a good healthy run with Forsberg and Talbot, that they could use Hellberg as a trade piece. That's something that they would rather do rather than put him on waivers. So to me, the Golden Knights, they have the depth. It is possible we could see a goalie trade. I personally don't think that's something we're going to see in the short term, given the long season that we're facing and the high risk it would put them on needing another goaltender should something happen to either Logan Thompson or Adin Hill. But later in the year, if things are going well before the deadline, sure, it's possible they could maybe move Brossoit as an option here to maybe upgrade another part of the team. But otherwise, I don't think we're going to see that just yet. I know other teams too, like the Leafs, for example, like we talked to them about yesterday. I don't see them rushing into a move. There's word Matt Murray could be back soon. I know some of the articles I read about the Vegas goaltending maybe link Toronto as being one of those teams that needs some help. And so far, so good. I think they're going to try to ride this out here if they can. Get Murray back. Hopefully get Samsonov back in the not-too-distant future and just see what they can do. If right now they're winning with what they have, so why bother messing with it and use assets that you don't really want to part with? So let me know your thoughts on this news and everything else discussed in today's video down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.